Well, hello from Sandy Park in Exeter, where Ireland's World Cup has come to an end. They were beaten 18 points to 13 by France here in their quarter-final today. Anna Caplice and Rory O'Connor are here with me. Anna, to you first, your initial thoughts on that?
Is absolute heartbreak for the girls. Just the manner in how the game went. I just thought Ireland were phenomenal in so many ways. They pulled together so many of their strengths that they had shown across the tournament and put it together today, and they made France look very ordinary. France weren't a fan of the weather, obviously, and Ireland played to it. So many outstanding moments, and I'm just absolutely gutted for the manner and how this game finished, and that Ireland have been knocked out.
I know. Oh, well, just a reminder that rugby coverage on Indo Sport is brought to you by Energia. Energia sponsors rugby in Ireland at all levels. The Energia Rugby for All initiative supports inclusion and welcomes everyone of all abilities. To learn more, go to energia.ie/rugby. Rory O'Connor is here. Rory, what do you make of it all today?
Yeah, similar to Anna, it's very hard to say anything but that Ireland brought their game to the table here in Exeter. They delivered a performance that was good enough to put them in a position to win it, but I think the difference between maybe where these teams have been over the last 3 or 4 years showed in that second half, where France got their moment and seized their moment, and when Ireland had their moments, they just weren't good enough to capitalise on those moments. And they'll have huge, like they're speaking to the players after the game, Sam Onan in the press conference there, they are obviously disappointed and proud and probably not ready to reflect on those moments, but I think when they go to sleep tonight, that 35, there's a bit of speculation. It's grown from 35 to 39 phase down in the media room before half time, where they had the ball on the French line on the back of a 15-metre maul drive. They had the French scrum in trouble. They had the French down to 14 players. Their captain had gone to the sin bin. They had them where they needed them to be, and just in incredibly difficult conditions, their skill execution let them down at pivotal points. And also France defended like their lives depended on it, because they wanted it was 13-0 at that point, and they wanted to get in at 13 because they knew that 13 was close enough that they could get there. And yet the conditions changed during half time. It was amazing. It was
like the weather gods were
with Ireland,
yeah.
And they still just weren't able to execute. And it went right down to the wire. It was a long game. The first half lasted more than an hour. It was epic. It was probably it was the quarter final of the weekend.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, once again in a quarter final, Irish rugby comes up short. But I think the players can be really proud of what they put out there, and yet they'll be hugely disappointed.
Yeah, I was just in the mix zone there, and the players just said that exactly. Stacey Flood as well. They just spoke about just the pride in that performance compared to what they delivered last week against the Black Ferns. They really brought it today. How pivotal for you, Anna, was that moment? Because we were just like 13-0. It wasn't going to be enough. Now the wind here was incredible. A lot of locals here were kind of saying, this is coming. When I woke up this morning here in Exeter, I was like, it's not too bad. But it got bad before it got better in the second half for Ireland. But how pivotal for you was that moment when they failed to get that third try?
Yeah, it was hugely pivotal actually, and could be the defining moment of the game. But also on that, 33 phases, or I heard 33, whatever it was.
30 plus, let's go.
30 plus. 30
it was every
plus.
35 on the screen, because we had a screen in front of us. It had gone to 35.
So thinking about that, even in terms of Ireland's attack, and it's huge credit to France's defence, right? But Ireland in the past would never have been able to put together 33 phases and keep the ball. So I really admired, and even in the second half, when Ireland had the big moment, and you could sense it, this is a big moment, they were still very calm and collected, and that is something that they can be proud of as well, because especially last week against the Black Ferns, like so often they went into their shell, and I just thought that today they were still running onto the ball, still winning meters, like again, it just France's defence, and it takes a really great team to play as poorly as they did and still pull off a win, and it was down to their very patient and clinical defence as well.
Yeah, let's go into Rory,
I just think we're getting into the nitty gritty of it, I guess, but like where I think they will have regrets and where I think they will look to develop in the next 3 or 4 years going to the next World Cup. I think their calmness on penalty advantage and their decision making on penalty advantage needs to improve massively, because there were times where Amy Lee Costigan had her both hands in the air with about 50 metres of space, and forwards would truck it up on penalty advantage.
Absolutely.
It never went out the back. There was never a second option. The plan was the plan. There was times when I think Dan O'Brien, who kicked brilliantly, certainly with her long and on kicking all day, there was times where the chip space was just in behind and she didn't see it, or she just wanted to go with the plan, stick to the plan. the ability to break system and have confidence in your own ability as a rugby player. Like, again, really hard conditions, like throwing a bit double skip pass out to Amy Costigan wasn't the right play, but maybe a kick pass. We saw a little chip over the top in the second half. We only saw it once last week as well. Little things like that. The plan worked to get them into the right areas, but sometimes you got to break with the plan to score.
100%.
And I think there was moments there, particularly in penalty advantage, where they'll look back and go, God, we were trucking it up when we had acres of space outside, and when they did go wide, their passing wasn't good enough. Again, conditions will completely accept that, but when France got their opportunity on their own goal line with a turnover from the replacement hooker, 2-3 passes, it gets out to the winger and she's gone, and that's them taking their chance.
And one more element that I wish we had seen, and which would have bought Dana that bit of space, is just if that pod is there, instead of taking it on and trying to win the meters, just pull it back to Dana out the back, because that front pod was such a threat. France would have had to keep their feet in behind, and they wouldn't have been able to fly on Dana, because then you're maybe releasing a bit of space for that forward pod. That's something that Ireland were kind of missing across the last few weeks, I find. Just that 2 lines of attack, pull it in behind, and then Dana has all the time in the world to literally the whole stadium was pointing at Amy Lee almost, weren't they, saying, and she was waving, and it would have been perfect. That would have been sensational, and that could have made the difference today.
And we even spoke to Amy Lee yesterday, asked her, do you want to get your hands on the ball more? And of course she did, and there was just so much space there that, again, that is something they really have to learn more about, how to make the most of that. Rory, let's get on to another one of the big talking points, which obviously is that Aoife wafer and allegations of a bite.
Yeah, early in the second half, footage has emerged. Certainly, it was picked up on the camera. It was picked up by the broadcasters. Aoife wafer, bottom of a ruck. The French number 6, just get her name right, Axel Bertomeu, appears to bite her. Like, certainly, I think there's enough evidence to certainly merit a TMO review. It's a difficult thing to prove, an allegation of a bite, but if you have a player coming to you, a player who has no reason to do so, it's not like it's the end of the game and she's looking to get a penalty to win the match. It's early in the second half. She's, I think, in her own half, and she's pointing to the big screen. And I think the replay came up and the players were all pointing at the big screen. We asked Sam Monaghan about it there. She said, I asked the referee to look at it. She told me it would be looked at. They never heard back, and the player stayed on the pitch for the rest. Well, she actually went off, but she was allowed to be replaced. So it looks to me like enough to merit a red card. I'm not a referee, but the evidence that I can see in the clips that I've seen, not just the stills, the actual clips, I think it looks like a very incriminating footage. Certainly, I think merited stopping it and having a look at it. And she may pick up a ban. Ireland have 4 hours post full time to instigate a review. If not, the citing commissioner has 12 hours to decide whether to have a look at it. And that player may end up missing the World Cup semi-final and final, but that's no use to Ireland, who could have had half an hour against 14 players. And they had half an hour against 14 players anyway, because there was 3 sim binnings within the game. But it was a moment of madness, really.
Is that not what the TMO's there for?
But it was a really strange moment, because if a captain is going, can you please check this moment? The message in response is never, he's having a look at it in the background. No, you stop the clock, you go over and said, TMO, can you check this please? Can you have a look at it? And everyone can see it, and there's no hiding behind. It was a really strange moment. That's not how it works. You stop the clock and you trust the captain when they come to you with a moment like that, especially something so cynical. And I am shocked watching back that footage of how dirty that play was. I'm shocked by that. I've been playing in France as well. And
have you ever experienced
No, I
anything
haven't.
like that?
I've never seen that. And I not in France, and I have seen it at different stages of my career, but like, it's not I'm just really shocked that an international starting player who's got so much, that just shows how frustrated they were as well. But that is what you'd resort to, and it does look like she goes to bite her and maybe thinks twice about it, so doesn't actually like follow through with really like taking a chunk out or whatever. I don't know, but I was shocked at it, to be honest.
And the TMO in Tempest is incredibly experienced. His name crops up in these games, men's games across the world. He's done big World Cup games before. This is not a novice TMO, and I guess there was part of you that has to trust with the officials, but we've seen the footage and it's all over social media now, so it will go everywhere. And I'm sure like Ireland didn't really want to use it as an excuse, and I think that's fair enough. But it's a game changer to lose a starting flanker. It changes everything. Like France went 6-2. It would have limited what they could do in that second half. And you don't want to be coming across as sour grapes, but at the same time, if a player does an act of foul play, that should be a red card.
Yeah.
And what about Aoife Wafer? Like, played the full 80. She'd her arm wrapped in her jersey at the end. Her strapping on her knee was falling off her in the first half. She went down. I thought it looked like she was going to come off that time. Everybody just took a deep intake of breath. But my goodness, she was sensational, topping a number of the stats, there today. She just showed again what a world-class player she is.
Absolutely, and I do feel like, if she'd had more game time coming into this, could she have been the one that actually broke the line? Because, she still managed to do it, but she did make a few mistakes as well, which are kind of uncharacteristic of her, but you could really feel the difference that she brought today, and for someone who is just has come straight back in, didn't play since the Six Nations and has come straight back in and able to have that impact. It just proves time and time again how phenomenal she really is and how this team needs her.
Her toughness was just on show for all to see. To win 3 breakdown penalties, I think it was, across the game, and getting her body into
tackles as well.
dominant tackles, dominant carries.
Incredible.
Just a phenomenal athlete, a phenomenal player, but more than that, she's not going to get another World Cup chance for 4 years, and you could see that she just wanted to stay out there, even though she was getting a bit broken towards the end, and her influence probably did recede as it went on, and she had to play 80 because Brittany Hogan went off with an injury. But to play 80 after not playing all season, not missing the whole pre-season.
Sunday,
last
incredible.
weekend we saw her in the week. I couldn't believe she was picked based on what I saw in the warm-up last week.
Yeah.
But she's a big game player, and I mean, Ireland will have regrets from this tournament, absolutely no doubt, but to lose 3 of their best players for the pool stages and two of their best players for the whole thing has undoubtedly had a massive impact on what they could do here. Because if you put Erin King and Dorothy Wall out there, you probably beat France. Yeah. And look, everyone's losing players. It's an attritional sport, but they will.
Those kind of players.
Yeah, it's a bit of a perfect storm. It's so unfortunate for them, and to do what they did without them shows we're not quite at the level where we've got depth. Ireland have depth in every position. But that squad development is progressing, and you hope that they kick on from here, even though there was a lot of talk in the post-matches. There always is about looking forward and how Ireland will improve. But this was a chance to win a World Cup quarter-final and play in a semi-final and either a final or a third-place playoff. Unlikely to beat England, but still, to put yourself on that stage, it was there. And that chance might not come around in 4 years' time, because you just don't know what's going to happen. And that's why it's such a proud day for them in terms of how they played, but it will be a regret, I think, when they're finishing up, and because they'll look back on this as a chance.
Well, we saw it on their faces at the end. There were tears. There was almost like a stunned silence at the end.
There was a stunned silence at the end with when the
line out and
the line out and the knock on, and everyone was like, what, surely it can't end like this. It just seemed so unfair, actually, that there wasn't a true attack left in Ireland, which they seem to have earned. But on that as well, coming into the next World Cup, we look at the likes of South Africa, who are building something massive. You think of what this tournament has looked like, the amount of investment, the legacy that this really, really should provide for, all the countries that have been involved. Everyone's just going to keep getting better. Yeah. So it's not just good enough now for Ireland to be like, okay, we'll we should have been there, so we'll probably be there at the next one. That's not going to cut it. There has to be, a shift in mentality here, and they've gone. I hope they beat France in the next Six Nations. Is what I'm thinking.
Isn't that what they have to do? That's what they have to do next, isn't it? Because this group had never beaten France before, and Scott Beeman said as well that inside when he came in first, or he said it on the post-match interview that the next World Cup in 4 years' time was the big headline for this team. So what would you like to see, Anna? Just looking at that overall bigger picture, obviously there's so many elements. There's strength and depth that they need to build. They need to get in other kind of backup out half as well, for the likes of Dan O'Brien, all that kind of stuff. But what would you like to see happen?
I think, and this goes hand in hand with full-time programs as well, but the game understanding. So when I was in camp, we used to go in at the weekends and we'd have, limited time, and you're trying to get through all your lineouts, and there's so much on-field detail, but how often do you actually get to sit down and study the game in terms of decision making? Really in-depth knowledge coming from specific coaches, team debates around what would you do here, a true understanding of how they want to play and when is it good to break from the system and when is it good to trust the system. And I know that doesn't sound like a 4-year project, but actually it is in terms of experience and how they build over the next few years.
Yeah, a word as well, obviously, to the scrum. They were absolutely outstanding in that area today. Obviously, Dennis Fogarty, the scrum coach there as well. Scott Beeman Beeman mentions there as well, Rory, that he's got another year left in his contract, but we are going to see a breakup of this coaching team now. Alex Codling is going to move to Munster. Garrett Steenson, we're not quite sure 100% about his future, but it is a new, like, they could have done with a bit more continuity in the coaching staff after this.
Well, I mean, it half broke up 6 months before the tournament when Hugh Hogan was basically taken out of the equation and replaced against the players' wishes, which was a questionable decision. You're not looking at that today going, really, the defence let them down in any way, and maybe you'd look at the fact that France scored from inside their own 22, but at the same time Ireland were down to 14 at that point. It wasn't great across the tournament, you would say that, but stability will be good. I mean, Beeman will go for another year. Maybe that's a good time for a change. I'm not sure. He's definitely progressed the team from where he picked it up, and he's done a very good job. But nobody's irreplaceable. So look, you're 4 years out from Australia. There's no need to start making rash decisions now. I think see how Six Nations goes. See what he wants to do. I mean, he didn't sound awfully like he said he wanted to stay either when he was down there chatting. That was the impression I got from him. So maybe that's just the natural time where that will come to an end. And the RFU have a pretty good track record in the men's game, particularly of finding good coaches. And I think B-Man was a good hire at the time that they brought him in. I think what the next coach will find is a team that is coming together nicely. That today was very tactically smart, certainly very well able to follow a game plan. And I thought the game plan today was very smart in terms of how they played the conditions. They've got an out half whose kicking game is exceptional and is so much better than what France were able to put out there today. They got the edge on that. Their scrum was excellent. The recruitment of Perry has just made it such a difference with her coming on the bench and her. But as we've said, they need to develop that game understanding. I think, from an RFU perspective, it's the wider thing. Is look, you've got big crowds following Ireland here. How do these people go and support these players for the next 4 years? Yes, you're putting on a game in the Aviva Stadium as you call for, brilliant. But what about week to week? How will people get to see them? How do you sell the Challenge Cup if that's going to be the Celtic Cup? If that's going to be the way forward? Will the clubs ever see these players across the next 9-10 months? Probably not. So, should they? I would think so, or they should have some connection to their communities to try and build on what's here.
There's a gap missing there.
There's a massive gap missing there, because it's one thing to sell tickets for that Aviva game, but these players are going to disappear for the next 4 or 5 months. You need the grassroots support, it's going to be difficult for them. But I think what fans will see is a team that they can buy into here, and a team that they can follow, and players and stars like Aoife Wafer, who will be over here playing her rugby for the next while, along with a couple of her teammates. And I think having those forwards playing the Premiership will be beneficial to them, because they'll get better competition, and that game understanding will help them. So it's still, I think, imperfect. It's the structures are still they're fighting a bit of a battle in terms of getting what they get onto the pitch based on the structures that they have, and full-time professionalism got them to this World Cup. Now the RFU, and I think this is the hardest step, need to figure out what gets them to the next World Cup, so that they are in contention.
This is probably the biggest step now, where they are now going into the next World Cup for this team.
Yeah, absolutely, because, like we've seen with other, countries who haven't quite got it right in terms of, just shoving the money forward and then, hoping that it just takes care of itself. There's a lot to look into, and the Celtic Challenge is a big thing. Is it good enough really if Wales aren't bringing their players back to play in it? When we spoke before the Six Nations, and Ireland kind of went against the grain here, but Beeman was talking about how great the Celtic Challenge was for preparing his players, and Sean Lynn and Brian Eason were saying how great the Celtic Challenge was for finding the young players to come in. So that's that can't continue. It's fine, and Ireland managed it really well, and they kind of surprised us all when we thought that Celtic Challenge isn't going to be enough to prepare these players, and then they had a really good Six Nations and other games.
Yeah, so I think as well that he likes to develop their training ID during that, because they're all kind of training together. That's one of the points Scott would say about that as well.
Yeah, it is, but then there's the element of you look what
is that enough?
Is it enough? And you look at what England have created here in the Premiership, and the amount of leaders that are across the English team, because they're all leaders in their own club then, so coming over to England is great for a lot of things, but Irish players aren't going to come into the English club teams and be leaders. So that's one thing that needs to develop, because you've got Sam and Tricky, who are will they be around in another World Cup cycle? Probably, but they need more support as well, because you can see actually when they go off or when that changes, there's a little bit of indecision there, and there needs to be more leadership opportunities for players around them, outside of just them.
So that's the end for Ireland. I don't know how you're going to survive, Anna. How would you sum it up?
Oh, God. To to
Did it
sum
live
it
up
up,
to your expectations in terms of what Ireland delivered? Now, they bloody showed it out there today, didn't they? But overall,
yeah. I suppose, I think that I was saying beforehand, you know what, a third place playoff would be phenomenal. Phenomenal is
Yeah.
kind of like what I would have felt about it. So they didn't quite get to that. So what they have achieved is really good when we consider the entire context of the last few years. I think the kind of disappointing factor is how good they've been in the last few years that made us think and hope and believe that they could be in a semi-final. And there were some stages there when we were talking about a World Cup final, you know, and that's how good they had been in the last few years, you know, and the promise that they showed. The injuries, yes, and, you know, that was a big
it was a
part of it. So you've got to take that into account as well. But I think they will look back and rue this day, but at the same time know that there's still a lot of work to be done as well.
yeah, like Sam Monaghan reminded us inside there, like 2 years ago, they were playing in WXV3. You know, that close, 5 points to
Which they should
Houston.
never have been.
They should never have
you know,
been
it
in
should
there.
never have
Should
fallen
never
that
have been
far,
in
but
there.
it meant that this World Cup cycle was a sprint towards the end. And we saw when you're learning, when you're cramming for your exams, stuff falls through the cracks. And the four best prepared teams probably are in the in the semi-finals. I know France were pretty poor today, and if they play like that against England, they get hockeyed. But again, I said it last week, like, France had all the pressure on their shoulders today. Like, Ireland kind of put pressure on themselves last week and under-delivered against the Black Ferns, who brought a brilliant performance. They were a bit wobbly yesterday, so you can't be 100% every day. I think Ireland needed to bring their best today. They brought their best. It was incredible in some regards, but it just wasn't good enough to be the top 4 team.
Yeah.
And I think for them to be at that top table in 4 years' time, as you say, the teams are getting better and the standard's going to be higher, and you can imagine Australia are going to get it right in 4 years, given they're the hosts.
Yeah.
So it's going to be harder. At the same time, you've now got a solid base. You have a quarter-finalist team who won 3 of the 4 games over here, put it up to one of the best teams in the world. Right, how do you build? That's the question for the
that
Irish.
is now the new reference
They were all
point.
here. They were all
Yeah.
sitting behind us in the press box. The big wigs, the decision makers, they know that that's the question. I'm not sure they have the answers yet. They need to come up with a viable strategy, but it also needs to be a strategy that builds on the other stuff that's gone on here. The crowds. I know this is a smaller stadium and it wasn't as impressive a crowd as last week. I think maybe having a World Cup final quarter final involving England an hour away on the same day probably took away from the attendance as well. But last week's crowd, how do you get those people involved? The people who are watching RT today, how do they get involved for the next 6 months when these players aren't being seen? That visibility side of things needs to be addressed as well. So it's not just a performance out in the HBC, that it's an overall thing that means that in 4 years' time, this tournament attracts more eyeballs and more interest and more. But like, it's a starting point. It's a far better place than it was. Like, there is an argument that they're better off going out here because a semi-final next week could have been a very difficult task for them, having got up for this one, and England are so good.
Yeah.
But a semi-final is a semi-final. I don't think they would have. That's a bit of a loser mentality.
Yeah, but it would have been like 2014 maybe, you know, when then all the momentum was there, and then they had to play England, you know, which is just a completely different ball game. But the thing with that, the semi-final, is that, like, even if you lose it, you are contesting a third place playoff.
Yeah.
I actually feel like
Get another
Ireland,
game in there, 2 games.
Yeah, 2 more games,
Yeah.
2 more World Cup caps, you know, like that's it. That was a, God, we were so close to getting it today. I'm second.
Yeah, and it all came down to a spoiled line-out, which is just such an unsatisfactory way to end the game and to build yourself into that position. No, they did. I mean, there was a double banking penalty. The conditions were better, but it does come down to, you know, even do you tap that penalty? Do you go to the corner? If you go to the corner, you got to nail that line out. It didn't look like a bad throw. In fairness to the France captain, got her hand up, but she had no intention of catching that ball. She just was slap it anywhere because it'll probably go for a scrum. And that's the game. That's the winning team. One of a former international said to me as we left the ground, he said they know how to win and we don't. And that's probably where they're at right now. And and that's why Ireland needs to go to France in the Six Nations and put up a performance. You know, win their home games again, build on this, find some more players, and get those experiences, which is the big key.
And send those messages between the World Cup, because what that did to New Zealand had to pull out all the stops to kind of get that revenge on Ireland, like, between it. You know, that's the quality that Ireland is demanding as well. So they've got to follow it up. You know, if you're going to win those games on the interim, you've got to then follow it up in the World Cup then as well.
Well, that is it for Ireland, and that is it from us at Sandy Park. Rory and Anna, thank you very much for all that, and thank you very much for listening.